Hi, everybody. So we're here for Mariemont's Rules and Law meeting. We have about 5 agenda topics with regard to updating the code. Just more of the list we already started, so right down our start time. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my list here. Marcy, you probably heard me explaining this to Bill. So we had a request, and it was a couple of, I think people mostly are no longer on council, but when we were working on the hillside issue behind 6600 Mariemont Avenue, we had some engineers come in and look at the soil and such, and also down in the creek about how we could kind of shore things up. And the initial response that we took to the problem was not great. It was probably because we didn't have the best information. And so we had a request from a current council member at that time that engineering studies that are conducted should be conducted by an engineer with specific training on that particular kind of issue, or in this case, it would be like a whole separate, education. So for example, we should have had, and we ended up having in the end, a geotechnical engineer doing that evaluation rather than like a general civil engineer with regard to the hillside. So I went through the code book pretty closely, and the only place I can really find, and I feel like this is pretty good, where we address such a topic is in 151.077. It's a huge section. And it's called Planned Unit Developments. It's under the zoning code. And it discusses when you're preparing new land for development or for improvement. So I guess it's not always new land, but like an existing piece of land for a different use. It talks about the village engineer needing to go and prepare the report and review the data given to him and to make a recommendation. So our current village engineer has been terrific for us, and he is a civil engineer, currently employed in his discipline. So he's up to speed on everything. But even he, with this geotechnical stuff, was like, this isn't your average day in the office for a civil engineer. So there are other things that come up like that. Like, for instance, I just had a good conversation with Eileen Beatty with regard to noise and setting kind of guidelines for what's acceptable in the village. And if we were to do that, we would have somebody come in who can measure ambient decibel levels and make recommendations upon what is or isn't acceptable, rather than having like some other person come in. So that's sort of the basis for this discussion. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
So what are you thinking about? What kind of change would you think would be?
I mean, I just think a simple piece, and I don't even know if it would necessarily go in that 171 section, because that really deals with new developments. I just think that when we do a project, like a road project, you'd have a civil engineer who, works on roads and has some experience with ODOT. If you have a landslide, you have a geotech, poor Chris. I mean, I can't imagine calling him in and saying, okay, what should we do here? I mean, once he was given the opportunity, he said, I'd be happy to hand this off to experts, geotechnical people. And we had 2 different ones come in to talk to us about that. So I think the product in the end was much better when we used someone who was a more focused professional in a specific discipline. So I would just like to, without making a bunch of bureaucracy, put a statement in the code book that, and we'll have to find a good spot for it, that when we're doing a project that requires an engineering study, that the study needs to be done by an engineer who's in the specific discipline for the item that needs to be studied. That's a lot of words, but does that make sense?
Have you asked Chris lately how he feels about, I mean, that's one specific example from a while back, but have you talked to him recently about how he feels about actually putting something to that effect in our code book?
I haven't. So based on our recommendation, I will ask him. I mean, having worked with him for the past several years, he's always been very open to having people come in, and when we've said, hey, Chris, what do you think about this or that? He'll say, well, with the qualified, I think it's okay, but I just looked at it peripherally. He's always willing to lend his opinion, but he's also always happy for us to get an expert opinion. He's never been territorial about anything. So I would definitely ask him if he thinks it would be.
I think it makes sense to bring him in and ask his opinion.
Mhm.
Since
Okay.
it largely affects him.
Yeah. And I think really my goal with this isn't to make his job more complicated. It's more to take the pressure off of him trying to weigh in on something that he thinks might be right, but we're asking him to do something out of his depth,
Well, I totally see the value, especially with that specific example, because that was quite a
That was an expense.
messy situation from what I understand.
Yeah.
It's just, I think in general, it's just a good practice if you're, aiming some specific piece of law to put into that's absolute to get their input,
Yep.
Like for example, for what we did with, what we were trying to do on MPF with the demolition stuff, that, getting Don involved and asking his opinion, is this actionable? Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So if I ask him and he is, saying that seems like a reasonable thing to him, are you both okay with doing that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. If Chris says it's okay by him, yeah, I think so. And then
Or maybe just, I don't know if it would make sense to put it at the discretion of, like where he can ask if he wants. I mean, I don't know what makes sense to say you absolutely have to do this or that he's allowed some leeway.
So I think the reason this item came up as an item to put into the code book was because Chris, like all the other village employees, are employed by the mayor. So when the mayor doesn't want something to happen or doesn't want to pay a bill, it's not you, Bill. He gets pressured to do something a certain way. So I think, while it does add what could be perceived as a little bureaucracy to the system, it also takes that pressure off of him, and he's not pressured to not go out and get opinions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of where this all developed. I hope we don't have that sort of situation again, but it would take, frankly, people who are public employees don't get paid enough to be pressured by people to do the wrong thing. It's just not fair. Okay, so I'll ask him what he thinks, and then we can always revisit this. I'm not going to put this in a report for the next Monday's meeting. Okay, so another item. Let's see, which one do we want to? Okay, so projects that are from a funding source outside of Mariemont. So like if we have a grant to, like the Petoskey Road grant or something like that. This is from the same council member. Projects, no matter the funding source, should require interim reports to council as to the progress and funding dynamics, meaning like how much is left in the grant versus how much are we paying out of pocket and what the agreement is. So there's a possibility that the reports could come to whatever committee. It would likely be Public Works or potentially Economic Planning. And then if they're of a certain size, we could say that they come to council as a whole, because it's something we would want to know about.
Hey, Maggie, I'm sorry. Something distracted me and I checked out for a second. I apologize.
Oh, sure.
Back up a little bit and start over. I'm sorry.
Great, no problem.
So there's make sure I'm tracking with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So there was a statement given by a prior council member that's on my list that said he thinks that all projects, regardless of the funding source, should require interim reports to council as to the progress and funding dynamics.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Basically, it's just project management, like, so that we're all in the loop and we don't get a question. My thing I keep coming back to is so many times I've been like standing in line with a baby strapped to my chest at Starbucks and somebody will be like, oh, hey, how's the blah, blah, blah coming? And I'm like, what? and they're like, well, you're on council, right? Wouldn't you know about this project? So it's just kind of to keep an open line of communication. Not that we necessarily get a call on it. It's just that we're aware of like where we are in the budget, how much of the money we've used, how much we have left to go, if we're on track and that kind of thing. So we can troubleshoot if necessary. So I think, so Rob had an opinion because this was from Dennis, and he and Dennis spoke, I guess, a while back, and said like maybe for smaller projects, it might make sense to just report to the committee where that project would lie, likely, public works, maybe economic development, depending on the project. But maybe for larger projects over X number of dollars, it should come to all of council. So that's on the table to discuss if we think that that should be a requirement. I kind of like it.
I think it's good to be in the loop, like you said, but that's why when Dennis had recommended it, I said, gee, I don't know that we need to have on every little thing. It's like, do we establish a threshold above which, you go ahead and let council know?
Right. So what do you think, Marcy?
I think it's a good idea. I guess what I'm wondering in my mind is that something that needs to be in our code?
Right.
Or is it just a matter of policy?
Right.
I guess that's my inexperience showing there.
No, I mean, that's a really good question. And they're literally all the things we're going to talk about today. I guess my assumption, I have assumptions, and some of the things I'm learning as I'm hopefully getting somewhat up to speed here. I'm just kind of shocked at some of the stuff that doesn't happen that I would assume would happen. I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. I can see how it doesn't, because we're basically volunteers. Yep.
Sorry, Kat.
No, you're right. Like one of the things.
So I would think that would happen, and we wouldn't need to have it, as a rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm kind of an organic, thinker. I kind of work through things and talk through them as I'm thinking about them before I come up with a final opinion. But that's just what occurs to me outright. So I don't have a problem with it. And it is helpful, I think, to know, and that's like one of the reasons I like to sit in on other people's committee meetings. So I know what's going on. If somebody's saying, hey, what's going on with X, Y, or Z, at least I am aware.
Rob, what do you think?
I agree with what Marcy's saying, and like you, the thing is, so
sorry,
that's right.
I have an 18-pound cat stepping on something that was going to break. Sorry.
No, that's right.
That kind of day.
I don't. Do we have a policy statement? Because I agree with what Marcy's saying. It'd be good for us if we had something, a policy thing that we could refer to. I'm not aware that we have a policy statement that we could all reference to learn how things should happen.
Right. And so you and I, Rob, and Bill and I, 5 minutes ago, even, and over the last years, we've talked about building some infrastructure into this government, right? Not bureaucracy, but infrastructure. And one of our items was talking about like a handbook. Like there's a lot of stuff you learn, like Marcy said, just sitting in on things, being on council for a few years. But your first couple of years, it's hard because it's very complicated. There's a lot you haven't seen before, and you have an opinion, and then you realize, oh wait, I didn't know half of the story. So in my mind, to put there's two things. If we could whip up a handbook fairly quickly, I think it would be big, but we could do that, and this type of thing would certainly live there. Alternatively, it's kind of an infrastructure building type of step to put this simple statement into the code. The difference, I think, would be that if it's in the code, we get to say, look, this is in the code, this is how we do it. Don't deviate, don't try to get around it. Whereas if it's in a handbook, it's kind of a suggestion. So I am open to doing it either way based on what people think.
Yeah, because I think there's another, I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little bit off to the side where I think we've talked about, we'd like to get from a finance committee, we'd like people to get 2 bids, 2 bids is a sort of I'd like to set that as a minimum expectation. I don't know that I feel like we have to put it into a code book, but I'd like it documented somewhere that there's an expectation that if we're going to go out and get quotes for something, we get 2 quotes. So at least we have something to compare it against versus we've had, since I've been on council, people come forward and say, oh, I got a quote. It's like, well, how do I know if that's a good price?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I agree that I don't want to clutter up the code book with a bunch of stuff like that, but I think it's more an operational handbook, like you're saying, that we ought to be trying to help create expectations around how do things operate, how do things run.
Right.
So Rob, I'm sorry to go out, and if this is too off topic, just tell me. But I thought as a government entity, we had to put something out to bid, and anybody who wanted to bid on it could.
It's if it's over $50,000.
Okay.
So we have things like, things have come through the finance committee that are permanent improvement fund related that are below 50,000.
Okay.
So I still would like to see at least two quotes. Just get 2 quotes. Let's make sure that we're still getting a good price on this thing. So that's, you're right, Marcy. If it's over 50, it has to go out to bid. But if it's under 50.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep. So I
agree. I don't know what the best way to solve that is. Because again, I think that's good standard practices. I mean, maybe we have a statement of standard practices that we go or something. I don't know. I guess the question is, I mean, how does Terrace Park do that? How does Madeira do that? I mean, that's a lot of times what we do is we look at them and see, do they have that on their code books? I mean, is that a good place to start? Or am I trying to reinvent the wheel by even bringing that up? I don't want to make.
Oh, no. And I actually did not even think to look. So I can do that. I can go back and see if that's in a code book. And if it's not, we can put it in a handbook type thing.
I think let's go ahead and start identifying things that we think.
Sure. Sure, like interim reports, the number of bids. That's a good idea.
So we have a running list that we can start, but I think that's a good idea, Marcy. Let's check and see what other people are doing, if they have something already. I mean, again, if it can jumpstart our process, that's great.
Well, and also, I mean, just on the practical standpoint, it seems to me that if we can have a statement, I mean, of course, we would have to run it by Ed to make sure that it's legal, but maybe we can save some money by not having him have to actually write the legalese. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If it's just, statements that we can make.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. So the next step is, Maggie, you'll reach out to some of the other communities?
Yep.
I would just send them an email. I would just send them an email. If you want, I can reach out to some of the people who I've talked to, and I've got contacts in Newtown and Fairfax and Terrace Park as well, who I've been reaching out to, and they've been really helpful.
Okay.
You want to? You want me to? What do you want to do?
Why don't you do those 3, and I'll I've been in touch with like Glendale a lot, so I'll check out their code book's really easy to get through. So I'll check out their code book and ask if I don't see anything, and I can call Madeira.
I don't think, I mean, we don't know if we need to get 5 or 6. I mean, at 2, 3.
Yeah. If, I always try a couple more than I need in case people don't call back.
Oh, okay. Well.
Because everybody's volunteer, right? Like we're all doing this kind of in our spare time. So, okay. So the next item is kind of along, in my mind anyway, it's kind of along with this, and it came from Dennis also, with regard to grant expenditures. So we get a statement of bills that we've paid, right, in our council packet every 2 weeks. And that is necessary and it is informative. However, when you have several grants concurrently running, it's very hard in your brain to keep straight, like, okay, this big bill was over here and I'm remembering that, 3 months later when we get another one. And so Dennis wanted a statement that grant, and this is, I believe this is another handbook thing. Grant expenditures must be verified by invoices, receipts, canceled checks, or similar bank records. So just to reconcile things. So we do approve the bills and then we don't really see it again. And I have always assumed, similarly to your statement, Marcy, that like, well, you know, the women in the office handle it. Like Joni has a folder where she keeps everything and it's organized.
Right.
But a lot of times council members aren't always in on the same kind of thing. Like, where are we in a grant? And that's part of understanding like the mechanics of that grant. Every grant works differently. This middles of the expenditures, you know, sometimes flow differently for different grants. And we haven't always been kept in the loop on like how that's going. So the more I think about this in light of all of the rest of our conversation, I think this is another item to put kind of in that same section of not the code book, but a handbook. And Rob, you've talked to Dennis about this. Do you kind of think that also?
I agree. Well, and the thing is it depends on the grant, you know, like, because I reached out to Chris about this to try and just as part of my education when I was coming on board. And like the Madisonville Road project, that's a grant where the bill comes and it gets split, right? There's an it's like they get 25%, we get 75%. I don't know what the exact number, I was just making it up, but and so when the bill comes, it gets split. And so, you know, we own what runs through our books is only our share of the cost.
Right.
However, there's other things like the Petoskey project is coming up that's going to run through our books, and then we're going to get reimbursed. And that's also how like the municipal building addition was done too. We had to incur the expense, and then we had to submit the documentation, and then we get reimbursed back.
Right.
So,
and it's interesting, like, especially being a newer council member, when I was seeing things like that, if you had asked me to like draw a graph of which projects we were doing and the size of them in terms of dollars, I would have been absolutely wrong, because what I saw was the bill coming to us. And I didn't know, you know, because a lot of things had started before I got on council, like what was the state's portion that they were paying. So if I had to, you know, say to a resident, well, this is a bigger project and this is a smaller project, I was wrong every time because the money flows differently. So this is almost kind of in line with that reports to council project management wise on where we are, what's in the budget, what's left, where it's come from. I think it could go under that same section. That makes sense.
yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to put this in the code book, I think, but I think it is. I think we have something where we can track what's going on for each of the projects, especially the big projects. You know, when we're spending money, it's like, okay, how are we doing it? And I really think it's important for council to understand up front what the funding mechanism is. You know, like you were just saying, what percent of this is being covered by some other entity, and how is it going to flow to us? Is it going to be, again, is it going to be split on the front end, or is it going to flow through our books and we're going to get reimbursed on the back end, you know?
Right. And I think, you know, the project could, or both of these items could be easily handled in kind of a simple report that takes like our major projects. And I know for some people they're really great with a balance sheet, but for me, like a pie chart of where the money is, what's left, you know, something very simple that you can just glance at and understand conceptually what it is. Because we're never going to be off to the point where we're concerned about fraud or something. This isn't what we're looking for at all. It's more just a general understanding of how things are flowing and what we're working on and where we are in the projects. And that'll help us also build a pipeline for budgeting, you know, in our minds, kind of like, well, what can we take on next year? What's falling off? What's coming on, kind of thing.
For answering the question, why haven't you done X, Y, Z? Well, because we're spending this on this.
Exactly.
Year.
And you could be standing in line at Starbucks, having looked at something simple 3 days ago and know exactly, instead of like, I don't know, I have to go dig into my council packet and find a balance sheet, and I'll call you in a couple of days when I understand it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, because it's funny, like even the Petoskey project's going to go, we're going to start it this year, but it's going to be all the work that we're not paying for, right? It's separate work. It's work being done by Duke Energy and stuff that's underneath the road. But once again, this is going to be even different. They're going to give us the money. We're going to go do the work, and then they're going to hold back the last 15% until we get it done. And then they'll give us the last, you know, it's just, they're all different. And so I think it's important that we all be on the same page, understanding how it's going to flow. Because again, what's going to happen is all of a sudden our cash surplus is going to look up, right? They're going to give us like $150,000.
Right.
It's like, oh, cash has gone up 150,000. But it's like, no. We have to go spend that to do this other work. And so don't count on that as an ongoing benefit. That's, they're
it's just flowing through.
Great.
Yeah. So I think it's good for all of us to be in the loop in terms of how things are going to flow.
Yep. Okay, so the one final item, and Rob, I have a note from you on this one that says, so the item and this is from Dennis's list also, all checks written against grants for major expenses must be signed by both the village fiscal officer and the mayor. And then Rob wrote a note, I don't know how it's done currently. Do we know how it's done currently? I put it on here just because if you have the answer to that question, I think we can talk about it. If not, we'll wait.
Bill, do you know?
Back up there a minute, Meg. All checks must be signed by the fiscal officer and the mayor. I don't sign checks.
Okay.
I mean, I would take that back. I do sign a couple of checks relating to mayor's court.
Okay.
But yeah.
So can you read it again, though? Read it again, Maggie.
Read it again. Okay, the statement from Dennis is all checks written against grants for major expenses must be signed by both the village officer and the mayor. I think that's so that we have a check and balance there.
But to your point earlier, I mean, we also receive the council packet has the bills to be paid, right? Because my understanding is those bills have not been paid. We've been invoiced, but we're
authorizing the payment of those bills.
Right.
Of those invoices, yeah.
Yeah. So those things that we get every 2 weeks are invoices where we're being asked to say, yep, go ahead and pay those.
Yes.
Right. No.
So I don't know that we have to sit there and say that Bill and Tony have to sign a check.
Right. Okay. I think it was really for big stuff because it says written against grants and for major expenses. I don't recall a problem in the past that this would have fixed. It's just on the list. I'm kind of working through the list.
And I think if we also create that tracking of the grants and things like that, it helps keep all of council in the loop. I think that'll help address some of that as well.
I agree. Okay. And then the final item on here, which is going to be, I feel like we're going to have this exact same discussion again. So the statement is any issues brought to the village solicitor concerning public business shall be presented at the next council meeting in person or in writing. Now, qualify this. This was a request of our committee made prior to the time where we received our solicitor's hourly billing in our packet. Now we receive that and now we see it. So I do not think that this is an item that we need to do anything about right now. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because leaving out the items that are criminal in nature, like I've seen times where he discusses, a DUI with the mayor or with chief or something. And I think we would never, more than just blacking out the names, we would never discuss those in public in a meeting because people could guess who it is and it's just not fair. But for other items like municipal type items, things he's working on for us, I don't know if people feel like the public should be made aware of those. I'm fine with just us knowing. And if people ask me, I'm happy to talk with them about it. But I don't know if we need to proactively talk about it and list these things for people in the community to see or not. I have no opinion on that at all. I'm just bringing it up for you guys to talk about.
So my opinion would be, like you said, we've put something in place now that would say, we all get copies of the invoice. So we all get to see what's working on. And if we have a question, we can always raise it then, either in council or we can just talk to Ed directly if we want to.
Right. And that's council. But in terms of people in the community beyond council, I don't know that matters.
No, well, again, it's data that's there. It's a Freedom of Information Act. If they want to ask for it, they can always see it, right? Because it is a document.
Right. So I don't feel like we necessarily have a responsibility to proactively.
Agree.
Okay, Marcy, are you okay with that?
Well, hold on one second. Ed's invoice, the monthly invoice, like you said, we're now getting, a very exact breakdown of all the charges. That doesn't actually become part of our council packet, does it?
Right. No.
Yeah. But if a resident wanted to see it, we'd have to show it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would ask.
It's a Freedom of Information Act thing. It would it's there, they can, so they can ask for it.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Me too. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't off track. So we are not going to do anything different than we're doing right now with regard to that.
No, but you know what? That would be another item that I would add to the handbook. Is,
Okay.
Because it's not a code book thing, but it's like, hey, this is ongoing. Again, let's keep us all on the same page about what's going on, type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's not
Okay.
documented anywhere. Well, maybe we did document it when we created that, when we had Ed, we re-upped his, whatever you call it, his contract.
I don't remember. Was that in the contract or was that something we asked for later?
No, there's a document, a one-page document, there's expectations.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember if that was one of the items.
I can't remember, but I think.
Okay. I mean, we can look.
I think it should go in, I should go in a handbook, because again, it's something we want to make sure that, whoever, Alice and Joni just says,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, I need to send this out,
Well, and regardless of like future councils, future mayors, I do think it's a good like yardstick to look at. It helps you remember what projects people are actively working on. Sometimes, I'll see something like, oh, the mayor discussed blah, blah, blah with the solicitor. And I didn't know that was even on the map. And it's kind of good to know, like you can ask a question if you need to. So
Yeah.
I think it's good. Okay. That is all I have. That was kind of like the leftover items that were not as pressing from our meeting on the 1st. The only additional thing is I had a really good conversation with Eileen Beatty. She called me Bill. And
Good.
we talked about how she's working on design guidelines with regard to it'll fit in with some of the cell stuff that we're working on. And so we discussed some of the things that she's putting in it. And she said she'd really like to get it in place as soon as possible, because as soon as somebody submits a request, if we have not voted those in and they're not active, then they're not bound by this, right?
I don't think we're actually voting them in. The design guidelines will we will publish them. We will put them out on the website and publish them, so to speak. And
so they're not an ordinance? She had said they were an ordinance.
no,
Part of
they become a supplement or I think Rob had a better way of saying it. They don't actually become part of 56, the cell phone ordinance.
Yeah.
However, they are, how did you say it, Rob?
I don't know, Bill, I forgot, but yeah,
They're-
you're right.
Okay.
Are the guidelines, they are guidelines that must be adhered to,
Okay.
by whoever's going to come in and put the towers up and so on. And so the key is to have them formally submitted and published, so that when PeakNet comes in here, we can say, yes, we do have design specifications in place.
Okay, so when I talked to her, she was talking about wanting to get them to council ASAP so that we could vote on them. So really all we need to do is come to consensus, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to show them to you. We want you to see them and be aware of them and
Okay.
kind of a thing. Let me just say this though. I mean, we want to do that. We want you to see them. It's going to be a little late though to make commentary in terms of making a change, because we really want to have these things essentially the ability to quote unquote publish them, that they're open to the public by
Okay.
Monday.
Then do they need to come through this committee?
No, they're
Don't they just go to full council? Okay. She was asking me if we could pull off like a 9 a.m. Friday committee meeting to approve it and send it up to council.
I don't know where she's getting this. I mean, our conversations with Frost Brown yesterday, essentially, they laid it out. Like I said,
Okay.
it's not going to be up for a committee vote. It doesn't go through for a council vote. It's not being run through a committee. Essentially, when we have the document complete, we will publish it on our website and wherever else. And that's the extent of it.
So can I ask, like, just so I understand the flow of things, is the we MPF, is the we Mariemont the village? Like, who is doing the guidelines?
The village. The
I mean,
village doesn't.
she's
Gotta-
putting it
If you go back to the code that creates the code that we just passed as an emergency,
Yeah.
creates it designates it says.
It says that it says that we can make up guidelines, basically.
Oh, so these are those. Okay. So these aren't something else with regard to the historic district. These are those guidelines.
No. This all has to do with the document that we just passed, the cell cell tower document.
Okay.
And the committee, Maggie, is, there's a couple MPF people, and there's also a couple people in the village who had expressed interest and written to us.
Okay.
Susan Fuller, Elizabeth Fuller,
Mhm.
and then there was another woman. They, Bill read their emails at one of our
Yeah,
council meetings.
Okay.
So we reached out. So it's not exclusively MPF. It was kind of set up that way that they would do the legwork and council would be able to
Yeah.
put our stamp on it, I guess, stamp of approval.
Yeah, I remember that discussion. I was just thinking these were a broader guideline beyond just that stated part of that ordinance. Okay, that makes sense. So we don't need to have a committee meeting. I'm going to call her back because she really thought that she wanted to get it before us on Monday if she possibly could pull it off. And I said, well, your only time constraint is like if I need a report, because she was kind of talking to me like I needed to have a committee meeting in this committee. And I said, if I need to have a report, then I need to turn it in time for Joni to get it in the packet. So she was rushy. So that's okay. I will tell her not to worry about it.
I think, I don't know where the confusion comes from. It was fairly clear when we got off the phone yesterday with Frost Brown, how this was going to play out.
Okay.
Was she in that meeting, Bill?
Yes. Yeah. It was myself, Kelly, and Eileen. And we had a big conference going with a couple of guys at Frost Brown and Chris, for that matter, Chris Ertl.
So when you called me, when we talked yesterday, Bill, and you said this is something I need you to put some time in on, it was just more the review of what she's going to give us. It's not anything in this committee.
No, what I was talking about yesterday when we talked was an aspect of the design guidelines is this noise ordinance, our existing noise ordinance, and sort of strengthening that because as we understand it, part of the pole installation is going to have some type of a support box that will be mounted, lower, and it gives off noise.
Okay, so she was talking to me about that this morning also. So maybe it got convoluted and that was what she was wanting us to meet on. Do we need to meet on that ASAP before they submit?
Well, it would be nice. It would be nice to have something strengthened, although I talked to Dennis this morning and I know this noise ordinance thing is a little bit more complicated than meets the eye.
Yeah.
You want to put decibels in, you want to put distances in, you want to put frequency of noises. It gets very.
Remember we talked about, we've been through this before with the barn and with yard work companies and we never were doing that in the past. We can. So what she said is she wanted to do a little research on who, if anybody, has that specific of an ordinance. And then we need to take like a measurement of ambient noise around here and then determine what. And so I said, we could probably go to the university and have somebody help us out with that. But
I don't see this happening.
Tomorrow morning.
It's too involved. It's just too involved. It's something that we should definitely look at. And number one, until we really talk with PeakNet, I don't even know the characteristics or specifications of the box. How do I know how much
I
noise?
don't either. Yeah. I don't either. And she said it could be very, very loud, but I've never heard anything about any of this before because this is the first time I've been around it. So.
Okay. No.
Okay. So I do not need to reserve a time for us to try to meet rushy this Friday so that I can get something on the books.
No.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, are you, so you're going to send the design guidelines out before Monday's council meeting, just so we have a chance? I think it would be good. Again, I hear what you're saying. Unless there's something egregiously missing or whatever, I'm not going to change it. But I think it would be good if we have just put it on the agenda and send a copy to us so we have a chance to read it in advance and then just have some discussion.
I definitely want the council to see them before. I was going to try to get it out to you guys over the weekend, before Monday, so you'd have a chance to quickly look at it because it's an 8 or 9 page document. It's kind of long. So you should be able to
do that in a meeting on Monday.
Yeah. So, no, Rob, I will get it to you just as soon as I can.
Sure. No, that'd be good. That'd be great.
So I've got a question, Bill. So these are design guidelines, okay, that are already sort of grandfathered in by the fact that we passed that other ordinance. Are we able to change them?
Yeah. The document talks about being able to change it. The ordinance.
Okay.
The design specifications, yes, it could evolve over time. And yes, we could make changes to it, kind of a thing. I think again, we're doing this now because we really have to have something,
Right, I
keep using
understand.
that analogy. You can't call your agent to buy health or to buy fire insurance when you see smoke coming out of the roof. You got to
Right.
have it in place, ahead of time. That's
Yeah,
all we're trying to
I
do.
understand that. I just wondered if we can change them after we get them on.
It's an evolving document.
It's an evolving document,
Okay. All right. So I will not ask us to try to fit in a meeting on Friday then. That's good news.
That would really be pushing it. Yeah.
That would be, I told her, I was like, I could ask them, but if they're available, we've already had one meeting this week. That's a lot to ask. And she said, I don't know if I can pull off getting everything to you even. So that's not going to happen. So, okay. I'll call her and let her know.
Okay.
Okay. So can I call the meeting? I think we're good.
Good job.
Yeah. Okay. This was a little loose compared to our normal meetings. All right. So thanks everybody. And I'll see you on Monday. Well,
Okay.
virtually on Monday, right?
Virtually on Monday.
Hey, quick question. So as part of this, so this handbook discussion we just had before, once we get a response back, I think it would be good if we reach out to all the council members and Bill also, obviously, and start to say, so what do we want to put in there? What are the kind of topics we want to have included in there to help document how things should operate? And so I don't know when the right time is going to be, but I think when we reach that, once we've got the feedback back from those other communities we've reached out to, I think we should add it as an agenda item for a council meeting, just to reach out to people and let's, start to accumulate that list of things.
I think that's good.
We can share some of the things we've already captured that you've captured, Maggie,
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of missed a little bit of the beginning of that conversation, but some kind of a handbook that has procedures and how, just how great idea. Because, we've all had this experience. We were all newbies on council at some point. And we sort of, like Maggie was saying, you just sort of sit there, I don't know what's going on. I'm just watching and trying to get up to speed on this. If we'd had a book with the procedures and stuff in it, boy, it would have made it so much easier.
Well, and now that we're kind of building some infrastructure and, passing around information on projects, I mean, there's nothing like being on council for 5 years and then somebody starts talking about something and you're like, what? I had what? You look like a complete idiot.
Yeah.
So I think, we'll work hard on, and that's why I think this ramping up in communication, even though it seems like a lot to some people, in terms of like budgeting and the project reporting out on grants and such and where we are. I think it's really important. I think the handbook is the next step in our operations journey.
You know what the handbook also does this, and I obviously don't want to name names here, but it takes the personalities out of it. Like when I first got on council, I had certain people that were trying to explain to me how it all worked.
Yep.
With heavy dose of the personalities, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Not so good, because then I had to sort of go back and try and figure my way around, what was being said to how things actually work. Wasted a lot of time doing that.
Bill, do you mean somebody just sat you down and told you this is how it's going to be?
There was elements of that, yes.
Can you imagine anybody being that audacious?
Yeah. So
and asking who's going to nominate, which one of you two are going to nominate me to be chair of this committee?
There was that too. Yes. Yeah. So taking the personalities out of it, just having it matter-of-factly put in a book, much, much better way of doing things.
Yep.
Totally.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for meeting.
Right.
I really appreciate the time, and we will hang out again on Monday.
All right. See you all then. See you on the screens.
All righty. See ya.